Today, diplomats are gathering at a quiet resort overlooking Lake Lucerne in Switzerland to officially mark the end of a war that began in February 2026. But by the time the cameras start rolling, the real agreement already had been signed, quietly, electronically, several days earlier in a chateau outside Paris. That is the first thing to understand about the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. The ceremony is mostly symbolic. The agreement itself is already in effect. And when a war ends not with a surrender, but with a memorandum, a document that the U.S. Vice President described as a very general document only about a page and a half long, the important question is not who won the war. The real question is who benefits most from the peace. Let's examine both sides. What the United States gains first. The most obvious benefit, Donald Trump avoids what American presidents have feared. Ever since the Iraq War, a long and costly military involvement in the Middle East with no clear exit. Instead, he gets to announce an end to the conflict on his own terms and in real time on social media. The deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete, he wrote. Congratulations to all. There is also a quieter achievement hidden in the first section of the memorandum. The agreement does not only end fighting between the United States and Iran, it also includes Lebanon, meaning Iran is formally committing to restrain its regional activities as part of the same deal. For the first time, Iran is agreeing on paper to a ceasefire that reaches beyond its own borders. There are economic benefits as well. The naval blockade will be lifted, and Iran will reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a route through which about 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply passes. This gives global energy markets some much-needed stability for a White House that has closely linked its political success to controlling inflation. This is extremely important. There is also a political benefit. Trump's foreign policy has long relied on unpredictability. Supporters can argue that the surprise military strikes reinforced that strategy by forcing a defiant opponent back to negotiations that it had previously rejected as premature. What the United States gives up, but every agreement involves trade-offs. The first major concession concerns sanctions. Within hours of the memorandum taking effect, the U.S. Treasury is expected to allow Iran to resume exporting oil and petrochemicals. This will happen immediately, not after Iran dismantles parts of its nuclear program, and not after lengthy inspections. In other words, Washington is giving up its strongest source of pressure, economic sanctions, before the most difficult negotiations have even begun. The nuclear issue shows a similar pattern. For years, the U.S. position was clear. Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, estimated at about 440 kilograms and enriched to a level close to weapons grade, should be removed from the country entirely. The final agreement does not require that. Instead, Iran will dilute the uranium itself inside Iran while being monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The process will be supervised, but the material will not be surrendered. Time is another factor. The memorandum creates a 60-day period during which both sides will negotiate the more difficult issues, including Iran's nuclear facilities, sanctions, and missile program. Those topics were intentionally left out of this document during these 60 days. Neither side is expected to escalate the conflict. If negotiations stall or fail, the United States has already agreed not to use its strongest pressure tools during that period. What Iran gains? From Tehran's perspective, the benefits are significant. One of the biggest advantages is a proposed $300 billion reconstruction and economic development initiative to be organized with regional partners. For a country whose economy has suffered under sanctions and months of conflict, this could become one of the most financially valuable agreements Iran has signed in decades. Iran also regains the ability to openly sell oil on international markets at normal prices. Previously, much of its oil had to be sold through indirect channels, often at heavy discounts, mainly to buyers such as China, who were willing to accept the legal risks. Open exports could substantially increase government revenues. On the nuclear issue, Iran avoids the outcome it feared most being forced to completely dismantle or surrender its enrichment program. By carrying out the dilution process inside Iran and using its own specialists, the country maintains both the appearance and reality of scientific independence. There is also a less obvious advantage involving the Strait of Hormuz. Commercial ships will be allowed to pass freely for 60 days. However, Iran has already indicated that it plans to resume charging transit fees after that period ends. The strait may reopen, but Iran's influence over it remains. What Iran loses, none of these gains, erase the costs of the war. Iran's conventional military suffered significant damage. Command systems were weakened, and air defense networks were exposed to precision strikes before any ceasefire was reached. A memorandum cannot reverse those losses. Politically, Iran also made an important concession. For the first time, it signed a bilateral document that extends a ceasefire commitment to Lebanon. This limits the freedom of action of Hezbollah, which has long been one of Iran's most important regional partners. Some hardliners inside Iran have strongly criticized the agreement. One member of parliament even warned that it could turn Iran into what he described as a client state of Washington. The 60-day negotiation period also imposes limits on Iran. During that time, uranium enrichment is expected to remain frozen at current levels. Any move toward weapons-grade material is effectively paused, and all activities will be monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Then there is the biggest uncertainty, Israel. Israel was not part of these negotiations, did not sign the agreement, and has clearly stated that it does not consider itself bound by its terms. Israeli strikes near Beirut reportedly continued even after the memorandum took effect. The Israeli government has insisted that it retains complete freedom to act against Hezbollah whenever it believes necessary. Iran may have secured a truce with the United States, but it has not secured one with Israel. The final reality. So who won? The answer depends entirely on the time frame you choose. If you look at the immediate future, Trump gets an end to the war, oil markets become more stable, and a costly conflict loses momentum. If you look further ahead, Iran keeps its nuclear infrastructure, although damaged, secures the possibility of hundreds of billions of dollars in economic support, and retains practical influence over the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a peace treaty. It does not solve the most difficult issues: nuclear restrictions, missiles, sanctions, or Hezbollah's future. Instead, it simply creates 60 days during which both sides agree to keep negotiating while the fighting remains largely suspended. Whether this becomes the beginning of a lasting peace or merely another pause in a much older conflict is the one question the Islamabad Memorandum cannot answer. We will not know the answer today in Switzerland. We will know it in August.